Good?
Get a little closer.
Yeah, maybe a little closer, right? Can you hear me now? Good morning. I'm Rob Wildeboer, Executive Chair of Martinrea International Inc. On behalf of the Board of Directors and management of the company, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Martinrea's annual meeting of shareholders. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce certain members of the company's senior executive management team and board of directors who are here today. Seated with me at the head table are, to my immediate right, Pat DeRamo, President and CEO, and Director nominee, as well to his right, our CFO, Fred DiTosto. In the audience are a number of our executives, all of whom contribute to our success, including Carrie Pope, General Counsel, Hanny Morrissey's here, Chief Internal Auditor, and to tell you the truth, I don't know, we got Stuart Fraser, we have Bruce Johnson, EVP of Mind, and to tell you the truth, I don't know quite who else is here yet, but many of our executives are working in the States and in different places, taking care of business. Together, we comprise Martinrea's senior executive team. A critical element of our philosophy as a company was the talented people. The best in the business would be at the core of our company. We built this company with great people. And we think we have a company full of them, not just at the executive level. Feel free to talk to our executives here today after the meeting. It's nice to have an in-person meeting again. This is the first one in 3 years. We also have all of our independent directors here today. Please rise or hold up your hand when mentioned. Terry Lyons, Sandra Pupatello, David Schock, Molly Schoikett, Edward Waitzer, and Fred Olson. Our auditors are KPMG. I think Dave Power of KPMG is here. There he is in the back. Hi, Dave. I would also like to welcome a special group of people here today. As you know, if you know anything about Martinrea, a key element of our vision and mission, as well as a commitment to sustainability, is to improve our communities. And one way we do so is to support student programs in our facilities, whether they be a plant or at our executive offices. We are very proud of our increasing student co-op and summer student programs. They introduce students to our company, and they are a way to attract talent to our industry and business. They are something we use to promote diversity in our business and attract women into an industry that is not always viewed as gender-friendly. But it is not only the students who learn here. Our people consistently tell me how much they learn from the students, their energy, creativity, and purpose-fueled approach to work. So welcome from all of us. I hope you enjoy our AGM. I wonder if you could please stand up. We have a number of students here. And feel free to enjoy the full experience of our AGM. That, of course, includes the food. We've added to our food offering today, as students, this generation of students, as well as past generations, certainly do like to eat. With that introduction, I'd now like to call this meeting to order. In order that the meeting covers all the business for which it was convened within a reasonable time frame, we have prearranged with certain persons attending this morning to make and second motions. This procedure is not an attempt to discourage participation, and there will be ample opportunity during the course of the meeting to ask questions. After the formal business is attended to, and we've updated you as to the business and affairs of the company, we'll have an open Q&A. As in the past, this tends to be a fairly informal discussion between our shareholders and our management. After the meeting, we invite you to stay for refreshments and talk to us at your leisure. I do note that in our discussions today, we will probably use forward-looking statements based on our best guesses, our assumptions, and our interpretations, whether we do this in our presentations or in answers to any questions or any discussion. These forward-looking statements are subject to important risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from the conclusions, forecasts, and projections discussed in this meeting, as certain material factors and assumptions may have been applied in drawing conclusions. We're not going to be able to say or set forth all assumptions, risk factors, or so on every time we open our mouths. We do have a public record on SEDAR, which is comprised of our documents filed with securities regulators that set out the nature of our business along with the risks, uncertainties, and so forth that could cause results to differ materially from any forward-looking information. Our remarks today are qualified by our public record and those filings. Here's our formal disclaimer for your reading pleasure. All guests are welcome at this open meeting. It's an open meeting of shareholders. However, I would ask anyone other than registered common shareholders and proxy holders to refrain from voting. I would also ask that people refrain from any videotaping or tape recording of any part of this meeting other than ourselves. We are actually recording this, and the recording of this meeting will be posted on our website shortly and available also for our employees throughout the world. As chairman of the meeting, I have appointed Carrie Pope to act as secretary of the meeting. Would ask Roxanne Parsaud and Josette Coffeyberg, both of Computershare Investor Services Inc., who you met coming in, to act as scrutineers. It is now time to ask the secretary to table proof of service of the notice of meeting. I confirm the secretary has received an official notice of Computershare Investor Services as to the mailing of the notice of shareholders. As all shareholders should have previously received a copy of this notice, I would ask for a motion to dispense with the reading of the notice. Seconder? All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. The preliminary scrutineer's report stating the number of shares represented by the completed proxies received has been tabled. The scrutineer's report shows that there are present at the annual meeting of shareholders in person or represented by proxy 56 shareholders holding 53,539,635 common shares of the company, which represents approximately 2/3 of the outstanding common shares. I therefore declare this annual meeting of shareholders to be regularly called and properly constituted for the transaction of business. For your information, sufficient proxies have been received to pass all resolutions with overwhelming majorities. In advance, I would like to thank shareholders for their support. The next item of business is the presentation of the consolidated financial statements of the company. These include the consolidated balance sheets as of December 31, 2021 and December 31, 2020, the consolidated statements of earnings and retained earnings, and the consolidated statement of changes in financial position for the 2 fiscal years then ended, together with the auditor's report. The financial statements have been mailed to those shareholders who had requested to receive a copy and are posted on SEDAR. I would ask someone to move that the reading of the financial statements and auditor's report be dispensed with. Seconder? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. To read the financial statements would take about an hour and a half, so I'm very glad that that motion passed. It's now in order to proceed with the election of directors. As set forth in the information circular, each of the following persons has been nominated by the company for the position of director of the company to hold office for the ensuing year, and each has agreed to serve as a director if elected. Pat DeRamo, Terry Lyons, Fred Olson, Sandra Pupatello, David Schock, Molly Scheuchert, Edward Waitzer, and Rob Wildeboer. Pursuant to bylaw number 4 of the company, the advance notice bylaw, in order to nominate a person for election as a director of the company, a notice in the form required by the bylaw must be delivered to the company no later than the close of business on the 30th day before the date of the meeting. Or where notice and access is used for delivery of proxy-related materials, notice must be given not less than 40 days prior to the date of the meeting, or as otherwise set out in the bylaw. The company did not receive advance notice from any shareholder with respect to any other nominations. There being no further nominations, the nominations are now declared closed. As the number of persons nominated is equal to the number of board seats to be filled, I declare those persons who have been nominated to be duly elected by acclamation as directors of the company. On behalf of the company, I would like to thank the directors for agreeing to stand for re-election and for their efforts and contribution to the success of the company. In particular, your availability and willingness to spend long hours are appreciated. This is a busy time for our board, and we thank you. The next item of business is the appointment of auditors. Would someone please move that KPMG LLP be reappointed as auditors of the company until the next annual meeting of shareholders and authorize the board of directors of the company to fix their remuneration? Seconder? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carried. The next item of business is an advisory non-binding vote on Martinrea's approach to executive compensation. This is generally referred to as say on pay. Although the vote is non-binding, the board of directors will consider the results when assessing future compensation decisions. A detailed description of the company's approach to executive compensation is included in our proxy materials. I ask someone to present a motion to approve the resolution confirming and adopting the advisory non-binding vote on management's approach to executive compensation. And the text of the resolution approving this vote is on page 33 of the information circular. Seconder? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We appreciate the advisory vote in favor. Approximately 98.5% of the votes were in favor. In today's environment, that's an exceptional level of support. Thank you very much. If there's no further formal business, I would ask for a motion to terminate this annual meeting of the shareholders of Martinrea, and then we'll have our management presentations and Q&A. May I have a motion? Seconder? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carried. I therefore declare the formal part of this annual meeting of shareholders terminated. Thank you. The fastest we ever did was 7 minutes. But now that we're doing say on pay, that adds time, and the students added a minute and a half. So, not a record, but a record with students in say on pay, I would say. Okay. On every quarterly earnings call, I use the phrase, "We want you to see how we see the world." Why? Because in order to understand and assess our company, our strategy, the industry in which we work, our culture, and our people, you need to know how we approach things, how we look at things, frankly, for our shareholders and our investors, but also for our employees, also for our summer students. So today we're going to do that for you. I'm going to focus generally on the following: our perspective on the world and the industry and the environment in which we operate, the challenges we see, the positives we see in our industry and the opportunities. I'll talk a little bit about our stock price and the strength of our culture and our people. After me, Pat's going to give you a great perspective on the company's achievements and strategy and operations and opportunities and whatever he wants to talk about, frankly. And Fred will give you a financial portrait with a view on our outlook and capital allocation. There are many good things happening in our world, despite the headlines. Over the past 50 years, nations have gotten wealthier, people have gotten healthier, fewer face starvation, and we haven't had a world war, although we're kind of in one now with Russia in some ways. I'm an optimist, but our world, it seems, and our industry groans with some of the challenges we faced. We live in a broken world, always have. I find this a truth that's self-evident. I'm happy to debate why and how with anyone, but that's not the point. Here's a slide showing our summary of risk factors in our MD&A and AIF, which we file quarterly. There are over 40 risk factors there, and I'm sure we could add 40 more. I'm not going to go over all of them, of course, but suffice it to say your executive team, your board of directors, knows there are a lot of challenges in the world. Not a week goes by that somebody doesn't emphasize a new risk or an old risk. It's my job, and the job of my partners on the board of directors and senior executive team, to perform in the face of all these. And note that these issues are not localized. They are everywhere, although sometimes they differ from place to place. The latest publications for pension plan investors, for example, stress that geopolitics is roaring back into focus for institutional investors. We have over 16,000 employees, almost 17,000 now, in 57 plants, some further offices in 10 countries on 5 continents. Every place has its local issues, and the industry has its common issues. Your leadership team has to understand the world in which we live and work. We also have tremendous access to information in these places. Our team and advisors have a better perspective on what is really happening than most politicians, economists, or localized companies. And so that's a good part of my job, to understand this, and I think we have a pretty good handle on most of it. Before I get to the reasons I and we are positive about the near, middle, and longer term for our company and industry, let's go through what I think are the top 10 challenges we are facing that auto parts companies are facing today. Now, I like top 10 lists. It's a good number. 10 is a good number. It's the basis of our number system. There were 10 commandments. Guy Lafleur, my favorite hockey player growing up, wore the number 10. Unfortunately, died too earlier this year. We have 10 guiding principles in our company, and you can count up to 10 on your fingers if you use your thumbs. Here are 10 leading risks we face today in our world. They're in no particular order. Maybe one might have a different list, but these are mine as of today, or of this morning. So the first was macroeconomic issues. And I'll just go through these very briefly. We deal with cost inflation, interest rates, growth rates, slowing, are we heading into recession, is it expansion? Secondly, international supply chains, a big issue for auto parts suppliers. You've heard about semiconductor chips. They were a cause for our loss in the second half of last year, but other commodities also. Plastics, resins, energy, all are subject to supply chains that are under stress. Disruption adds to cost. Third one, erratic customer production schedules. For an auto parts supplier, this is mission critical. If the customer shuts down without notice, it hurts us a lot because it's very hard for us to adjust, so it's a killer. Labor shortages. We talk about labor, the need to find talent. This is especially true in the United States for us these days. Geopolitical risk. Russia-Ukraine is on the front of the news pages. And there it's not just a military risk, it's not just an operation out there, but oil prices, gas prices, wheat prices, nickel prices. They're an economic weapon against the West, and we're experiencing that. We also have China and Taiwan bubbling below the surface and a whole bunch of other things as examples. There are lingering challenges from the COVID-19 pandemic. The last 2 years, we didn't have an in-person meeting because of COVID. But there's still lingering aspects about it. We had shutdowns in China for 2 months, for example, which affected supply chains, and there's still stress everywhere because of that. Climate change and electrification, it's an impact on electrification of our industry. The transition to EVs, there's timing and headwinds for it. The timing will depend on a number of things. I always say there's 3 things that will affect electrification. One is we have to lower the cost of EVs so that people will buy them, whether subsidies or otherwise. We need infrastructure in place, and quite frankly, the people making the vehicles got to make money doing them, or the transition will be a lot slower than predicted. And ESG, of course, is something that we deal with as well. International trade policy, the USMCA and tariffs. We were talking about that was a major topic of discussion 3 years and 4 years ago when we were dealing with the new NAFTA. We're in the supply business. We like no border. Cybersecurity. We've been hacked. People have tried to hack us. We deal with it. We talk about it every quarterly board meeting. There's a book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends. Every director and senior executive has it, and it scares the crap out of you when you read what's going on in the world. And then finally, political gridlock. And basically, it's a polarization of views. There's more idealism, less pragmatism. There's a lack of compromise when people are discussing issues. People don't listen to each other very well. Political correctness is a weapon. And I think that this is one of the tragedies of our time in terms of as we are looking for solutions, people aren't talking to each other as they should. Conventional wisdom is always wrong. That's my motto. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of labeling out there. So many of these macro issues are things that we have to deal with, and of course they affect our valuation as well as a company. So all this kind of sucks, right? But let me now turn to a more positive view for our people, for our shareholders, and other stakeholders. We've seen challenges before. We've seen challenges throughout our existence. Since our formation just 20 years ago, the day before 9/11, we did face 9/11. We saw many supplier bankruptcies in the first decade of this century. We saw the Great Recession in 2008 and 9. Customer bankruptcies, our largest customer went bankrupt. We faced Donald Trump and the USMCA discussions, trade wars and tariffs, and a pandemic. We just go about our jobs, build our business, which is now larger than ever before. Our resiliency is fantastic. The resiliency of our people is fantastic. In the pandemic, for example, we've been working through our greatest launch cycle ever. We became a world leader in making PPE, such as level 3 masks or ventilator stands, to the extent the company today is, I believe, stronger than ever before. Our team just gets it done. As one of our principal states, challenges make us better. Analysts like to measure numbers. I don't think they understand the resiliency we have and how much stronger we get when challenged. So, to a more positive top 10 list. Why do we have reasons to be positive? First, worldwide auto sales are going up from here, not down. Our industry is growing. This includes North America. Here's a chart showing IHS projections. And as you can see, we're on the upswing. We're headed into a good cycle, North America in particular. We need to look beyond the next few months or be too tied into the present. For us, demand is not an issue. 2, the North American economy actually is in pretty good shape. We spend a lot of time, I certainly do, with economists and forecasters. We're often involved in the policy meetings. The North American economy is still driven by the U.S., especially in auto. Canada and Mexico together are still tiny compared to the U.S. One projection I saw in the past week shows U.S. growth next year at 3%. That's huge, given that you're talking about the largest economy in the world. The U.S. number is strong. According to the U.S. President and his advisors, the U.S. economy is now larger in comparison to pre-pandemic levels, and the percentage of this increase is the highest in the G7. This means purchasing power remains solid. This leads me to my next point. People can afford to buy or lease vehicles. New car prices are higher, as are used, but people have money or wealth or jobs or job prospects. In the U.S., the balance sheets of Americans are pretty solid. Unlike 2008, this pandemic recession did not hurt the pocketbook with lower house prices and lower equity prices, and they increased savings for many. Unemployment levels are low in the U.S., and participation rates are starting to increase again. People can get jobs. The confidence of Americans, again according to the U.S. President, is higher than at any time since 2013. That's significant, if true, although I don't always believe the U.S. President. But a poll yesterday released by the Wall Street Journal said more people are dissatisfied, but most people said they were satisfied or more or less satisfied. There are trillions of dollars in cash on the sidelines. 20% of U.S. GDP is sitting in cash. Even higher gas prices are not hurting sales too much. Note that today's cars and trucks are much more efficient on gas than they were in the last oil price shock in 2008. A rough guess is vehicles are at least 50% better on miles per gallon, driven in large part by CAFE rules and efficiency in engines. Not to mention that $1 today is worth less than $1 15 years ago. There's an inventory shortage. Here's a chart of U.S. auto sales over the past 15 years. As you can see, normal sales are well over 15 million, and we're not there. Basically more than 16 million most of the time. The spikes down are 2008 and of course the pandemic in 2020. We lost about 4 million in production and sales in the early months of the pandemic, maybe more, and since we've not recovered. As this chart from our investor presentation shows, U.S. light inventory days remain at historic lows. Next point, autos need replacing. They're getting older. The average age of a car on the road is now over 12.2 years, and that's a record. 15 years ago, it was 8 years. People need new vehicles to replace the old, and it's not just a wear and tear issue. It's a technology issue. Think of the new technology in vehicles over the past decade. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, driver assist, maps, better gas mileage, better performance, electrification. Next, interest rates are likely not going too high to dampen demand. At least not too much. Recall that chart of sales. The U.S. sold 16 million in vehicles in former days when rates were significantly higher. Further, the OEMs, now in financially good shape, have the ability to finance sales if needed. Most forecasters are seeing inflation already taming, and consensus predictions are rates will not go too much higher. A 4.4 to 5% interest rate is manageable, or has proven to be in this business historically. My personal view is that we'll see some 50 basis point rate hikes down to 25 basis points and then level off toward the end of the year. This view is supported by many discussions we've had with our lenders, including most of the largest banks in North America and with EDC or in our banking syndicate. The North American region in particular is poised to excel as a trading bloc. The USMCA was a good deal for our industry and our company, with our footprint in superb shape, with plants in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. We have always felt and said that the world will have trading regions that dominate. Europe, Asia, a China bloc and a non-China bloc, North America, and we're seeing that, a de-internationalization of trading blocs. Another word is regional reshoring. For North America, that means focusing on North American capacity. And we are seeing a lot of that in our industry. Mexico is a great place to do business and can replace just about anything China does. This is good for our footprint. As I said, we're superbly positioned for regional trade, especially in North America, but also in Europe. Next point. People need and want to buy cars and light trucks. We're adding new drivers every year. We read about many things in the media and from politicians and so forth, and the supposed fact that people will move to mass transit, that young people don't want to drive cars or won't need to, etc. And I just think that's a fallacy. People have been saying that for a long time, but we don't see it. We love to drive our vehicles for work, to the cottage, to keep safe from infection, which is a response to COVID, for freedom. It's a way of life for most people. People may not be buying cars when they turn 16, but they certainly do later in life when they settle down, move to the suburbs, another increasing trend with COVID. And mass transit works only in cities, and we're not Europe. Plus, population is growing in North America, especially with immigration and birth rates higher than in Europe and in some other places. JP Morgan estimates that something like 2 million new potential drivers enter the market every year. The use of Uber and Lyft means those drivers use their cars more, and they depreciate faster and they have to be replaced. And we believe the move to more driver-assisted driving will mean more elderly will eventually be able to drive longer. Next 2 points are more company-specific. Martinrea is positioned and poised to benefit from all these industry fundamentals. Pat and Fred will outline this more, but we're really positive about the industry. We have the right products on the right platforms. Industry demand and customer demand means our plants are filling up and they're going to be full. We have a great footprint in North America. We don't have a footprint in more dangerous places. Our balance sheet remains strong, our revenues are up, our EBITDA is up, our free cash flow is going up, we're making money. We see continuing improvement going forward, and they'll talk about that. And that's how we see the world. The 10th item is our culture gives us confidence we will perform. Now I'm going to talk a few minutes about that, but before I do that, let's just take a quick look at stock price performance. Every year I go over stock price performance with you. Sometimes this is more fun than other times. We don't profess to understand the stock market or how investors make their decisions, and frankly, we're certainly not alone in that. Also, macro issues may often affect valuation more than company-specific ones. There's not much we can do about not having semiconductor chips. But we do believe one thing. Sustainable companies with great cultures will be around a long time. We are now almost 21 years old, from 0 to over $4 billion this year, and as strong looking forward as we've ever been. Here are a couple of charts. Our 5-year performance, as we report in the proxy materials, as we're supposed to, is here. We're the green. So as you can see, we did okay. We outperformed more in the period. To the far right, from your right, is Cooper Standard and NEMAC. They're direct competitors in our fluids business and aluminum business. Respectively, they didn't do so well. The interesting thing is that the Canadian auto parts suppliers, Magna, Linamar, and ourselves, provided positive returns and did better than most, which is very interesting, and kudos to Canada. It's not where we want to be, but it's okay. And then why don't we look at year-to-date? So our year-to-date performance to last, I think it's Friday, we're down somewhat. The market as a whole, of course, is down too. I think you're all aware of that. But there's been a decline in our space as well. We're holding our own, better than most, but not happy. Saying that we suck less than the other guys is not necessarily your motto. Since our positive Q1 results, we see a lot of positive. I think our share price is up 25% since we released. That was the time that a couple of analysts said you should stay out of auto parts companies, and since then their investors, if they listen to them, missed out on a 25% return. Going forward, we believe that we will see good share price appreciation if, as, and when we meet our outlook. The future looks great. And now I'm going to talk about culture, as I generally do. It's the core of what we do. We talk about culture a lot at Martinrea. It matters a lot. It matters a lot to us. Our culture has a profound impact on our company, our people, and the other stakeholders that we serve. So we take it very seriously. Peter Drucker, the management guru, once said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And we think he's right, especially in challenging times. And sustainability is at the core of our culture. Our vision for the future, you've seen it, making lives better by being the best supplier we can be in the products we make and the services we provide. Our people need a why, and that's a why vision. There's a proverb that says, where there's no vision, the people perish. Very true and very appropriate. The company's mission, I think most people have also seen that, summarized, it basically says, take care of your customers, take care of your people, take care of your stakeholders, and be good in your communities. In pursuing our vision and mission, we developed on a collaborative basis a set of 10 guiding principles to be communicated, reinforced, and adopted throughout the company. And here they are. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to focus on the golden rule in a minute. We articulate our company culture comprised of three basic building blocks: entrepreneurship, lean, and the golden rule philosophy. They're core to our 10 guiding principles in the following schematic. And you've seen this before as well. The vision's at the top, the constituents we serve and the mission are on the sides, and then there's the lean thinking way, entrepreneurship, and the golden rule. You've seen this before, I think, in a lot of our publications. It's in our sustainability report. It's in our customer presentations, in our internal presentations also, in our investor presentations. I'll spend a little time on entrepreneurialism. We've been entrepreneurial from the outset, encouraging all employees, from executives to general managers to our people on the floor, to act and think like an owner with a stake in the enterprise. We act like owners because we are. I look at this business the same as if I owned 100% of it. That's what you want me to do, I think. I also think always about the people who also own this business, and that includes our employees. They need this business to provide them with what they need, a job. It's still one of the greatest social policies in our society, a job that is secure and safe, one that gives opportunity for fulfillment. And I think we're pretty successful. Our employee surveys show that, and our relatively low turnover rates do also. A lot of people love working here. So what does entrepreneurship and ownership mentality mean in practice? It means we make big and small decisions with a view to being around a very long time. True sustainability in a challenging world, which I talked about at the outset. We're just over 20 years old now, but as I said, I've grown from 0 to 4 billion, soon to be 5 billion. Just not too bad. It means we try and avoid major risks that can turn around and bite us in the butt. On a geopolitical basis, for example, we never set up shop in Russia, despite intense pressure from some customers to do so. One reason, Russia is corrupt. Bribes are the norm there. Last I checked, that's against our law. We also don't trust dictators. Another example is China. Despite intense pressure, including from some investors, we have maintained a light touch in China. Looking at China, we always saw potential geopolitical risk. If China did not move towards full WTO membership, for example, if there is a trade war, if there are tariffs and sanctions. We're looking pretty wise today with limited exposure in both areas. We take a long-term ownership view. At the same time, we've been bold in growing our business in many other areas. We've gone full bore into Mexico with great success. We remain advocates for investment in the U.S., the South, Middle, and North, because it's the economic center of the auto business, we believe. And we have invested in Canada because we believe in Canada. There's a lot of positive auto investment in Canada, by the way, as recent announcements illustrate. We have grown our footprint carefully in Europe through acquisitions and building on what we have bought. And our growth in Europe is largely tied to growing our relationships with the European manufacturers, not just in Europe, but in North America. Our new plant in Tuscaloosa, full of Daimler work, is testimony to that. This is what an entrepreneur does, take a long-term ownership view. We believe the future, and have always believed this, is regional. And that a great place for us is North America, our greatest footprint. This too is a wise move. Be very, very, very strong in your home market first. As entrepreneurs, we also seek out opportunity, even in the midst of a pandemic or a credit crisis. As we said in 2009, why let a good crisis go to waste? We bought a company in the spring of 2009 when 2 of our customers were going bankrupt. We bought an aluminum company in 2011 out of bankruptcy and turned it into one of the industry leaders and built its North American presence from $0 to $300 million annually when the current launch cycle is completed. As entrepreneurs, we have seized opportunities in materials, investing in graphene and becoming the largest shareholder of the world leader in graphene manufacturing and introducing new product into our industry. We have been co-venturers in a company that can now make and is making graphene-enhanced lithium-ion batteries. We are investigating aluminum air battery technology and additive manufacturing using the latest and greatest in aluminum powder. We set up a new innovation division to help promote innovation in our company called Mind, like good entrepreneurs do. And as you know, our whole system, with each plant being a center of excellence, encourages entrepreneurship. So as you listen to our thoughts on what is coming for the rest of the year and next year, remember these 2 words, resiliency and entrepreneurship. We see lots of opportunity. Briefly on lean, which is a second pillar, we embrace lean thinking as part of our culture, emphasizing eliminating waste in all aspects of our business and operations. The elimination of waste allows us to reduce unnecessary cost, thereby making us competitive. If we're the cost leader, we're going to be profitable even in tough times. It's a culture of continuous improvement in whatever we do. Finally, at the core of our One Martinrea culture is a golden rule philosophy, based on treating others the way we want to be treated, with dignity and respect. It also means following our 10 guiding principles in our business and operations, as well as in how we interact with our customers, suppliers, stakeholders, and communities. Being lean or being entrepreneurial is not enough in our view. These cultural elements overlap and are tied together with our golden rule, dignity and respect approach. I want to go just a little deeper on culture before I finish. Much literature, including several recent Harvard Business Review articles, has spent time on the importance of culture, and it's going to become a very popular topic with culture experts and studies and advisors, I am sure. Lots of money to be made, telling us what we should already know. I think we've been ahead of the trend with our principles and focus on people as part of our DNA for a while. Note this is and will be more important than perhaps ever before as we talk about the Great Resignation, and all sectors of the economy are looking for people to fill job vacancies or attract talent. Work isn't working for a lot of people. It's not just about money or title or even liking coworkers, although these factors are certainly important. One study has shown these 3 questions are more important to answer for your people. Was I excited to work every day last week? Did I have a chance to use my strengths every day? At work, do I get a chance to do what I'm good at and something I love? At last year's AGM, I talked about an employee really looks for 3 things at work, namely mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Both approaches are, in my view, quite similar. This is what we have tried to do for years, encourage people to develop their skills. That's mastery. Our entrepreneurial approach encourages the development of autonomy. Our vision and golden rule gives life to purpose. As we know, and studies show, that if we can intelligently link these, we will, over time, achieve higher performance, higher employee engagement, higher resilience, as mentioned earlier, and lower turnover, combined with a love for the content of the work itself. We have a lot of people here at Martinrea who love their jobs. I love mine. Pat loves his. Fred loves his. At least they tell me that. I've heard this from so many people. I believe it too, by the way. I've heard this from so many people, especially as we work through the pandemic. I've said to many, including my kids as a parent, if you don't love what you do, why do it? But it's our job to find something to love too. What are some of the small or large things we do in this company to support this perspective? It's all about the people. I was explaining to someone who was asking about our success in the pandemic and before. And I said it all comes down to this. You got to give a crap about your people. That's not the actual word I used, but this is being recorded. The guy said, that's really good. So I wrote it down. The phrase is on my computer. You got to do this. You got to care. And people notice for sure. They know. You cannot hide. Each employee is different. Treat a person as an individual. Treat them with dignity and respect. Recognize not one size fits all. This is the heart of our golden rule. We all want to be treated as individuals. Build trust of individuals. Don't lie to them. Don't give them edicts from above that seem to come from nowhere or make no sense. We never forced, for example, a vaccination mandate on our people when it was a politically correct thing to do in some places. And others were doing it. We said, look, we encourage vaccines. We think they work. We'll make them available. We want you not to be sick. Test and self-test. Answer our questionnaires. But you are an adult. Be responsible to yourself and to your coworkers. Use employee surveys to judge your performance and effectiveness as a leader. Ask and get your people to give you useful feedback, including critical feedback. Our employee survey results are outstanding. We give to charity, but in our Give Some platform, we let our people decide where the funds are to go. A unique and useful program. Social interaction. People love to talk with each other at work. Listen to them. Have a picnic at your house where you serve. Have a potluck lunch at the office. Treat your people as your work family. Be mature and respectful with feedback. Flatten the organization. Any employee with a complaint can talk to the boss directly. Make HR a priority. We have HR experts in every plant, side by side with the general manager, who himself is an HR expert. But HR is also Pat's job, it's Fred's job, it's my job. Safety is a given. We've established a state-of-the-art safety culture, not just with COVID or making masks and establishing protocols, but keeping people safe physically and mentally too. Work in teams where you can. We do a lot of this given the nature of our work. Check in with your staff weekly if possible. Be nice. Say hello. Make eye contact. Show you care. Work should be an extension of who you are, and we try and make that possible for our people. And at Martinrea, we try to live our vision and principles every day. Our vision is making lives better. I love this vision. It reminds me of something my mom said to me all her life. My mom was born in the Depression, lived through World War II, immigrated to Canada at 17, became a nurse at 18, married at 20, had me at 23. Spent over 45 years as a nurse, and almost 20 years as a volunteer at hospice until COVID. Mom died 13 days ago. She told me, live your life with purpose and serve others. That's what we try to do. Our vision and golden rule culture fits in well. And if we do that, over time, we will grow sustainably and meet all those objectives we talk about and grow value for all over time. It's a long-term, sustainable, competitive advantage. Culture and putting people first is critical. We have known that for a long time. For us, it's not the latest fashion. I'm done. Here's Pat.
Morning test. Whoa. Good morning. I have to move around, as you guys all know. So I'm going to walk you through some of the things we're working on, some of the status of the business, and then I'll hand it off to Fred. So 2021 year in review. Faced a lot of challenges. Supply shortages, cost inflation, sales mix issues, heavy launch cycle, plants burning down that supply chips, earthquakes, weather, cats and dogs living together. I mean, it's been an unbelievable year. In my 40 years almost, I'll say 39 years, I have not seen a more tumultuous time in the industry than I have this last year or so. Despite that, we had some good accomplishments. We had our 20-year anniversary, now 21, as Rob mentioned. Launched more large programs than in our history at one given time. Part of this was due to the fact that 2021 launches, or 2020 launches rather, got pushed into 2021, and 2021 launches remained the same. So we launched over $800 million worth of business in a very short time frame. Maintained industry-leading safety performance. Rob talked a lot about safety, or a lot about culture. Certainly safety comes first, and as a company, for those of you that have been here for a while, the last 7 or 8 years have been an incredible improvement in our record, and we maintain that even during the pandemic with all our people working in plants, wearing masks in difficult situations, we continued to improve. We enhanced our covenant flexibility with our banks. We have a great banking relationship, and that certainly helped with the times when we weren't selling very many products due to the vehicles not being built. Increased our investment in Nano Explorer. We own just under 22%, or I should say just over 21%. Started a joint venture, the 50-50 with Nano on graphene-enhanced batteries, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then formally established the Martinrea Innovation Development Group, which I'll talk about that in a moment as well. Okay, so what's the status of the operations? 75% of our business is in North America, as Rob also mentioned. Volume and mix did improve in the first quarter, as you saw from our results. We expect this to continue to improve throughout the year. Cost inflation continues to be a problem. This has not gone away. This continues to be a drag on the business, and we're continuing to deal with it, and I'll talk about that in a second here. Limited spillover from the Russia-Ukraine war, limited spillover from the China recent shutdown for COVID. The reason for that is we tend to, as most of you know, build and sell and buy regionally. So we don't have a lot of stuff that crosses the ocean, some parts here and there, but generally we control within the region. Improvement is expected over the course of 2022 as supply normalizes. Europe. Well, I'm going to go back here for a second in the U.S. In North America, in the U.S. in particular, one of the biggest challenges that we have as a company right now in North America, especially in the United States, is people. You know, Rob talked about the Great Resignation, but if you take this thing one level deeper, what's the real issue behind the supply chain? What's the real problem behind the supply chain is the fact that we don't have enough people working, whether it be because of a COVID shutdown and supply gets cut off, whether we don't have enough truck drivers, whether we don't have enough people who have returned to work post-pandemic. Quite frankly, the feds in the United States put way too much money into the system, and a lot of people ended up with a lot of money, and they stopped working. Over time, that's starting to improve, and as we see that improve, I think the supply chain will fall in line with it. We do expect in some places, again in the U.S. in particular, that there will be a longer-term problem with employment until things are fixed, like their immigration policy and those types of things, because they frankly are sharp workers. That does help as far as Canada, which is performing much better, especially in the technical areas, and Mexico, where we don't appear, at least at the moment, to have any real people issues at all. So from a North American point of view, we're in very healthy condition, but shifting work to assure that we have right-sized plants for the number of people that we can employ will be something we'll continue to focus on. Now, back to Europe. Production volumes are improving there as well. We have inflationary issues there as well. Volumes are expected to continue to improve there, just like they are in North America. One thing that's unique in Europe as compared to most of the rest of the world is the energy costs, though they're going up everywhere, are going up at an exponential rate in Europe. We're paying right now 7 times more than we did for energy, that being natural gas and electricity, than we did a year ago or so. 7 times more. That would be like paying $25 a gallon of gas or a liter or what have you. You know, I think it's an equivalent of $8 a gallon right now in Canada. Sorry, I use gallons, but $8 a gallon, imagine that being 3 or 4 times higher than it is. And that's the kind of thing we're dealing with in Europe, along with the rest of the manufacturing sector. And then continued progress on our operating enhancements. Frankly, you know, when we bought the Metelsa BGN plant, we knew that one of the challenges was to get that plant operationally even and making money. And that plant has made tremendous strides. The Metallics Group has done a great job bringing it to its feet. Unfortunately, because of all the inflationary costs, it does get masked. And I think as you see this normalize, you'll see BGN be as functional and as good of a plant as Meshida is. And as far as the rest of the world, mostly China, Recently, as you know, China was impacted by their COVID shutdown. They shut down essentially Shanghai for a number of weeks. As of, I think, 3 days ago or 4 days ago, they've lifted those sanctions or that shutdown, so I expect that you'll see China get back on its feet. And we'll see the production numbers go up there on a relative scale. Overall, and Rob talked about this a little bit, we will see a multi-year high volume situation in this industry at some point. And the reason, if you look back at 2008, when we had the 2008 crisis, people stopped buying cars and trucks. And then in 2009 and 2010, when the government inserted some money into the system to get things running again, people started to buy vehicles. And we had a multi-year run of 16, 17 million vehicles in North America, specifically in the US. So when you take a look at those numbers and you look at the situation now, we've had the same problem, but for different reasons. One is because of the supply chain and we're unable to build as many vehicles. But on top of that, unlike 2010, there's no inventory today. Where back in 2010, there was an inventory. People just stopped. And then when it restarted, the OEMs ran as many vehicles, built as much stuff as they possibly could, putting a real strain, frankly, on the supply base. This next round will be even, I think, even greater because they have to rebuild the inventory at the same time. So I think we'll see a number of years of very high volume, and I think the biggest challenge for Martinrea is going to be making sure that we are keeping up. And so there's a lot of effort being spent in our operations right now to make sure we're ready for this very high volume that's bound to come. Okay, we talked about this a bit on our, sorry about that. Can you hear me okay? Okay. We talked about this on our investment calls. These are the big challenges between basically where we're performing today and where we intend to be performing in 2023. Material, labor, and energy, all the cost inflation that I was talking about earlier. Operations and customer production inefficiency. And then lastly, the heavy launch cycle. Let's go back to commercial negotiations. As this inflationary activity is taking place, what happens is our tier 2 suppliers are demanding more for their product. And it's regardless of contract. They expect us to pay more for the product because raw material prices have gone up. We have then contracts with our customers on certain prices for our products. So in a sense, the supply base, as you've heard, gets squeezed in the middle. So our job now is to go back to our customer and have commercial negotiations so we recover those costs, which can be very challenging. But despite those challenges, our group has done an excellent job of recovering a number of those costs. We're still not out of the woods, but I would say by the end of this year, those costs for the most part will be recovered or will have stabilized. As far as the operational and customer production inefficiencies, as you know, some of our plants struggle more than others, especially as they come out of launch cycles. And a lot of this is based on the erratic behavior of our customers. In the past, if a customer was going to go down for a part shortage, you would get a warning, sometimes weeks away. And so if you knew 3 weeks from now the customer was going to go down for a week, you would make your plan, you would reduce your workforce, and you would save the costs. But today, you start the week, everything looks good on Monday, and by Thursday, the customer goes down because they have a part shortage, which shuts us down. Then Saturday comes, they get the parts back, and they want to run on the weekend. So cost is much more difficult to manage during this cycle. Now, on the upside, the customers are improving. In the first quarter, especially General Motors improved quite a bit. Some of the others, not so much, but we are seeing steady improvement, and we expect by mid-year to late year, this should smooth out quite a bit more, so we'll recover these operational costs as well. The other good news is prior to the pandemic, we were running at about an 8% level based on our operational capability. And so we've already been where we're going now, so once the customer's schedule smooths out, our operational improvements should bring us back to where we were before. And then lastly, we talked about the heavy launch cycle. by the end of this year, that heavy launch cycle will be normalized, meaning we'll still be launching, but we'll be launching at what we're accustomed to. One of the things that really made the launch cycle hard this time, not only was it the largest launch cycle we've ever had, but our ability to move resources between countries to support the launches, which we rely on very heavily, we were unable to do because you were unable to cross the borders. So we had to locally try to accomplish a lot of what's normally supported for launch. Okay, some of those launches, some of the largest launches we had, the Jeep Grand Cherokee and Grand Wagoneer, which was Tillsonburg and Jonesville primarily for the Lightweight Structures Group. The Honda HR-V, this is not a high volume launch yet, but will be. But what's important about this, it's the first high pressure subframe we've ever made. Most of the subframes we make out of aluminum are low pressure. This was an all high pressure subframe, which we believe the market will continue to move to. Ford Mustang Mach-E, which is a low pressure launch, very high volume, and they're in the process of doubling that volume right now. So within a couple of years, Ford's planning on making 2 times more Mach-E's than they are today. And if you go to order a Mach-E today, and one of Rob's friends just did one recently, it's not, their delivery is February of 2023. So 6 to 8 months before you can get the vehicle. And then the Nissan Pathfinder Rogue was just a very large launch for us, which is now pretty much up and running, though Nissan, like other customers, are still having some problems with steady running. Some other big launches are named there. I won't go through them all. In propulsion systems, some very big ones. Again, the Jeep Grand Cherokee and Wagoneer, and then the Ford D35. The D35 6-cylinder engine goes in any truck, any F-150 truck that has a 6-cylinder engine is made by our plant in Querétaro, Mexico. And then one other very large launch was the Ford Maverick in Hermosillo. It affected both our metallics group, but we built a new plant for our FMG group to support the modules. So big year, and as I said, by the end of this year, we expect this to normalize. All right, I want to talk just a minute about Project Breakthrough. There's a number of you in here that were pre-Breakthrough, and a number of you in here that were here when we introduced the idea of Breakthrough back in 2018 and launching in 2019. So what is Project Breakthrough? Project Breakthrough was intended to grow our revenue and margins by providing engineered products with higher value-added content to our customer. Okay, more complex products that we engineer. More current multi-material or unlike materials to further lightweight. So as products have advanced, bringing together unlike materials such as aluminum and steel and being able to join those two has become a very specific technology that we focused on. And it's a place that a lot of the OEMs are going to develop products in order to make them sensibly light. If you go all aluminum on a product, it's very expensive. But if you can go aluminum in certain areas and steel or high-strength steels in others, you get a better economy of scale. Create a reliable product engineering source to our customers. If you take a look at our engineering group, in particular areas, fluids, chassis, we've become very strong. This is important because our customers are very stretched in their engineering groups because of the change into electrification. They're hiring tons of software engineers, and it's a very high cost situation. So they're relying more and more on the supply base to actually engineer their products, and we're now very capable to do that. Create long-term deep partnerships with our customers. Of course, when you're asking them for money because of inflation, this is a little bit difficult. But that'll pass in time, it'll stabilize in time, and our capability on the engineering and manufacturing end certainly creates a much better situation where you can have long, deep relationships with your customers. So you guys are familiar with well, some of you are familiar with our 2018 offerings. And so what's changed? And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's changed. Mainly the multi-material joining and the complexity of our products and some of our new EV products, which I'm going to touch on here in a minute. So we have three commercial groups, as you know, lightweight structures. Lightweight structures is about 50% of our content, which is body in white and chassis, both steel and aluminum. Propulsion systems, anything that stops or starts or moves or brakes a car. Engine components, battery trays again, transmission components, brakes, fuel, and so forth. That's about 42% of our business. And then flexible manufacturing is about 8% of our business, as this is industrial as well as our assembly group. So let's take a closer look. And I appreciate the fact that we brought some of the parts in here, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the unique things we're doing. So basically, 2018 and 2019, we said, we're going to change our portfolio. We're going to get into more complex products. We're going to join unlike materials, and we're going to engineer them. That was a big step for us, a big change in our thinking away from just commodity development of products. So, the Geely subframe. The Geely subframe is on an EV in China. Geely's a big producer of EVs and cars in general. What's unique about it, it's multi-material joining of aluminum extrusions as well as normal hollow aluminum die-cast aluminum. We fully designed it. We weld it, we do this all in our China plant, and then complete all the machining. Lucid Air body in white aluminum die-cast components. Front shock tower, which I'm afraid the laser doesn't work, but it's the upper right-hand picture. Front torque box is the one in the middle, and the rear torque box. What's important about this? One is that we're using the same die-cast machines for these types of products, which are new to the market and new to Martinrea for the most part, in the same equipment that we use to make engines and transmissions. So our capital structure stays sound. High dimensional requirements. There's going to be more and more of these types of products, what we call body in white products, on vehicles. So if you strip the skin off of a Lucid Air, and I don't know if you've seen a Lucid Air, it's a really nice looking car, but if you strip the skin off of it, the main structure of the car is right here, these 6 parts. You say, well, Pat, there's only 3 there. These are left-hand side, and there's 3 more for the right-hand side. But that basically creates a lot of the structure of the vehicle. The Jeep Grand Cherokee front rail assembly. Okay, we have our first one right here, and you're welcome to come up and see it after the meeting. Hydroformed upper tail rail, aluminum high pressure die-cast shock tower right here in black. Gen 3 high strength steel along the bottom rail. Self-piercing rivets, structural adhesives, so starting to use glues and rivets to put non or unlike materials together. Again, this is a real important strategy for Martinrea. Thin gauge electrogalvanized steel MIG weld. We've done some of this. We're doing a lot more of it now with a thinner gauge. Very important for our future. Very important to show that we can put aluminum and different high-strength steels, including hydroformed tubes, together with different joining methods. Ford Mach-E, right over here against the wall. You notice part of it's black and part of it's aluminum. Okay, fully responsible for the design of this, and there's a story that goes with this one. Ford went to another supplier to build these chassis components. We didn't even bid on it. And our competitor gave it back to Ford. They said, based on the design, we can't do it. So they handed it back, and Ford was down the road designing a vehicle without a chassis. So they came to us, asked us to help, and we said, okay, we can help. Not only can we build it, we can design it, and we did. This one over here, multi-material subframe. Steel, which is made in Silao, welded somewhat traditionally together, joined in Querétaro with the aluminum lower. So it's a low-pressure die-cast. Structural option for stiffness and mass and dimension, because the front subframe has to do different things than the rear subframe. Rear subframe's carrying the weight, the front subframe's carrying the crash resistance along with the weight. And of course, like I said, the whale steel structure. And then again, we assemble that in Querétaro and then ship it to Ford. And then the other one, which isn't up there, but it's up there in the picture, is more of a traditional rear hollow subframe. And just for your own edification, we are very strong at low pressure, hollow aluminum subframes. There is no one on the planet that can make hollow aluminum subframes the way that Martinrea does. It's very unique, and we're very good at it. Lucid Air subframe, it's right here. What makes this special? The front subframe, which is up here, and again, you can come see it afterward. Aluminum front features leading edge multiple process architecture. So for crash resistance, you've got different types of aluminum put together. Now, what makes this subframe really unique is it's joined using structural adhesive and rivets. 4 decades in the business, I've never seen a subframe on a vehicle that's not welded. I didn't even think something like this was possible, and we're the first. Lucid's the first to do it, and we're the first to manufacture it. I think we'll probably see more of it in the future. And then, of course, the rear subframe, more traditional aluminum one-piece hollow low-pressure die cast, similar to what you saw on the rear for Ford or the Geely. Okay, the last structural one anyway. We make the roof and we make the floor the floor underbody and the rear panel for the EVA 2 platform. The EVA 2 platform is Daimler's SUV or CUV that will be a global vehicle in the electric space. And if you haven't seen a picture of it, take a spy. It's probably the best electric vehicle I've seen, though I do like the Hummer too, I have to admit. If you haven't seen that, that's pretty cool. Utilizing new advanced joining technologies and mixed materials. Okay, now, mixed materials, and I'm going off the top of my head. Well, maybe I have it here, good. High-strength steel, hot-form steel, ultra-high-strength steel, stamped, extruded, cast aluminum components. That part, or assembly, is over here to the left of Rob, or is the right of the room, has 9 different joining methods, maybe 10, but at least 9 different joining methods. It's the most complex assembly the metallics group has ever made in its history. I would go further and say, I have not seen an assembly that complex anywhere in the world that anybody makes. So our ability to make this shows the market that we have great capability when it comes to joining methods, to ultralight materials that are affordable. Now we'll talk a little bit about our graphene brake lines. So brake lines with graphene guard. Graphene guard is our trade name for how we use graphene on our brake lines. High performance brake line coated with graphene, industry leading abrasion protection, which is one of the things that people want in their brake lines. And I don't know if you've ever seen a brake line the way it runs in a car, but traditionally when a brake line runs in a car, it's got pads all over it. So when it rubs up against things, these pads protect it from rubbing through. Because of the graphene protection, I would say 3/4 of those pads get eliminated in the vehicle. So it's a cost reduction for the OEM. It's lighter by about 25%. It's got improved chemical resistance, and it's been approved by Ford, GM, and Stellantis. It's in production on the Super Duty truck for Ford, the Explorer and Lincoln Aviator, the Edge, Nautilus, and then it'll go on the T1XX, Silverado actually it started this past May. So I think you're going to continue to see this graphene enhanced brake line capture more and more of the market. And it's selected as the Automotive News PACE Award finalist. So that's a big deal. I don't know if any of you have ever been involved with a company that wins a PACE Award, but from a supplier point of view, it is the greatest award. It's the Academy Award, if you will, for product. So the fact that we're a finalist is a pretty big accomplishment. So lightweight electrified vehicles drive the need for more advanced products, as I've just gone through. That's what's driving a lot of this. Where are we sitting? Right now, 2020, or I should say 2 years ago, we were about 8% ICE, or BEV, and electric, and 92% ICE. By 2026, 40% of our product will be EVs and BEVs, BEVs being hybrid vehicles. This shifts directly with, in fact, maybe a little bit in advance of the market. So for those that are concerned, where does Martinrea land as the world does the transition to EVs? From a timing perspective and volume, we're in very good condition. And I'll take this a little further. What does that do to our bottom line? So if you take a look at the addressable content per vehicle, right now our content can be somewhere between $2,000 and $3,300 on a typical vehicle. When you get into hybrids, it goes up a little bit because we provide both some EV and some traditional ICE equipment. So we have the fuel brake and the powertrain, along with the battery tray, electric motor housings, and so forth. And then it takes another step up in pure EVs, and so somebody has asked, well, how can that be if you're actually making less products? Why would EV go up? And a lot of it is around the battery tray. Battery trays are very predominant. They're very structural in the part of a full EV, which falls into one of our key categories being body in white. Most importantly, we don't have to reinvest as a company as the world makes the transition to EVs. The far majority of our equipment can be used on products for EVs, the same it can be used for products on ICE vehicles. So the transition for us, our base investment, is already in place. So 80% of our product already is agnostic to the market. 80% of our product. So whether it's modules, whether it's chassis, whether it's body in white, whether it's brake lines, it pretty much is the same equipment. Some difference in designs, and of course for EVs the complexity might change because again they want to ultra lightweight in some situations, but it's pretty much all stable. In our propulsion group, there's some shift. Obviously, in a full EV, you don't need an engine. Transmissions get smaller. You don't need fuel lines. But what do they need? They need electric motor housings. Electric motor housings aren't as big as an engine, but they're more complex. We get paid for complexity. We've won our first electric motor housings. It's now just going into production. I saw it in Meschede, Germany a few months ago when I was there on an old piece of equipment. The casting machine is one that we've had there for close to 30 years, making one of the most modern products that we make. So the fact that we can reuse our capital for EVs is evidenced there. And then, of course, battery trays. Battery trays, we've won our first battery tray, and that was also in production at Meschede when I was there a few months ago. So this transition is happening, and we're participating, I think, at the right level. And let's be real, the EV transition is not going to happen overnight. EVs are very expensive. They're expensive because batteries are still very expensive, and they're going to be expensive for a while. So government incentives will become important. Making EV affordable to the average person is going to become important. So throughout that transition, you're going to see the OEMs building both products and varying their volumes based on where they see the sales. They aren't going to shut off ICE and go right to EVs because they wouldn't be able to fund the EV transition. They're going to go to EVs at the rate that people buy them. And if you look at what they're doing, and you take a look at some of our customers, they're circling plants and they're calling them EV plants. The other plants are still running full out and will be for some time. So similar to our customers, we'll make the transition at the same rate that they do. And fortunately, our capital, because it's shared, will be able to do that. These are just some of the key products that we're on, some of which have launched, some have yet to launch. The Audi PPE launches next year. The EVA 2 launches this summer. The Ford Mach-E is already launched. The Geely PMA 1 is launched. The BEV 3 launches in 23. The Hummer has launched. Lucid Air has launched. The Samsung battery tray is launched, and the Tesla Model Y is launching. So these are real products that we're now on. When you think about this, 2018, with a pandemic in between, none of this existed. It's a huge accomplishment for the company. Okay, last thing I'm going to talk about, I'm going to hand you off to Fred, is EV battery joint venture with NanoXplore. Why are we doing it? We believe there's advantages to graphene-enhanced lithium-ion batteries. In fact, we more than believe it, we now know it. But at the time when we decided to do this joint venture, we believed it. Why does graphene have an impact on lithium-ion batteries? What makes, and some of you students out there are really smart people, you understand batteries probably a heck of a lot better than I do, but one of the things that makes lithium-ion batteries work well is silicone. The problem with silicone is when you charge and discharge a lot of energy, as you know, silicone's glass essentially, it cracks. What we found, or what Nano found, is that graphene can coat the silicone nodules and keep them from cracking, which allows you to do the things that you wanted to do with silicone but couldn't do before. So, the silicone anode coating the spheres allows for higher capacity and retention in the battery. Of course, battery cost is important, and right now, materials are pretty high because of inflationary issues around the world. We expect this to settle out. Battery capacity. Graphene enables the use of silicone in the anodes and improves energy density, so therefore it improves driving range, which is one of the current concerns with batteries. Charging speed. High conductivity of graphene improves charging speed, right? Graphene's electrically very conductive, so it allows for the ability to charge a battery much quicker, and in a similar fashion, it's thermally conductive, which allows you to lower the temperature, the operating temperature of the battery, so the likelihood of a fire goes down. Back in April, we had a battery day. Battery was held at the plant, I'll call it the mini plant that we built in order to prove this technology. The facility's up and running and it's making batteries. The technology has been validated. So when we built the plant, we weren't 100% sure. But the plant's been built, and both by our own testing and third-party testing, the aspects of improvement that I showed you a moment ago are now a reality. Greater capacity, longer life, faster charging, and enhanced safety. So, next step is to build a 2 gigawatt-hour facility. Of course, it has to make sense. We're validating the project economics. We're not going to do something unless we can make money. Financing, because it'll be an expensive venture, and we expect it to be financed primarily from the outside. And then, of course, site selection, which is probably more resolved and further down the road than the rest of them even. Okay. Last thing, last slide. One of the most handsome men at Martinrea is in charge of this group. What is the reason for or purpose of Martinrea Innovation Development, or MIND? Incubate, develop, and fund innovative technologies that are strategic to Martinrea's portfolio. When you're a manufacturing company and you build parts all day long and engineer parts all day long for your customers, it consumes your organization, as you would expect. So in order to be more innovative, we wanted to create a separate group for different investments and development of different types of technologies that could become a part of our company as we go forward. And that was MIND. And of course, as I said earlier, Bruce Johnson, EVP, is now Executive Vice President of MIND. Bruce was the Executive Vice President of Metallics and the head of our commercial vehicle or commercial group, lightweight structures. And we've been at this about a year, maybe a little bit more now. We've got some good activity from the equity investment front. Nano Explorer, which we own 21% or a little greater. We have the 50-50 joint venture. We've invested in a company called AlumaPower, which is an aluminum air battery, and all these are progressing. What else? We're evaluating other initiatives. A couple examples: additive manufacturing, more advanced robotics, software, believe it or not. And maybe a little later in the week or next week, we'll have a little bit more information along these lines of some activity that we've been working on recently, but we'll save that announcement for later. And then Martinrea provides support to our partners. So someone would say, well, if Nano provides the graphene, what does Martinrea bring to the party in a battery plant? Well, we bring our manufacturing expertise, our product development, our supply chain management, and of course other functions that manufacturing companies like ourselves can do. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Fred DeTosto.
Thanks, Pat, and good morning, everyone. From my end, I would like to welcome you to this year's annual general meeting. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to spend some time together and talk about the company with all of you, our many stakeholders. All of you have been very supportive of the company over the years, and your support is always greatly appreciated. So as always, thank you for your support and believing in us. It's also very nice to be able to actually have this event in person, finally. It's been a tough 2 years for everyone. I would argue that you would all agree that's the understatement of the last 2 years. So it's nice to be able to get together in the flesh and get back to some normalcy again. It's difficult to fathom, but as Rob noted, the last in-person AGM was 3 years ago. It's really hard to believe. And as you know, a lot has happened since then. We've faced many different challenges, and our resiliency has been put to the test, to say the least. And as the dust settles, I'm happy to say that we're coming through the other side stronger than ever. From where I sit as CFO, the team has performed admirably during this very unique and challenging period of time in our history. I personally couldn't be more proud of what we've accomplished and what we've overcome as a team. We've kept our heads down and continue to do so, quite frankly, and have done what we had to do to get to where we are today. The battle is not over. Challenges still persist, as Pat outlined. We're here, stronger than ever. We've definitely shown our true mettle, and whatever lies ahead, we are up for the challenge. In my formal remarks, I will start with a quick overview of our fiscal 21 financial results, acknowledging that 2021, unfortunately, like 2020, was a very unusual year. But I think it's good to recap the year and provide some context on the impact the pandemic and other various headwinds have had on our business and industry. I'll follow that up with a view on how we started the new year with a snapshot of our Q1 22 financial results, and spend some time talking about the future, which we see as very bright once the near-term challenges our business and our industry face fully move into the rearview mirror. And I'll also provide some comments on our capital allocation priorities. So our financial performance of 2021, coming off a pretty challenging 2020, which included the COVID-related shutdown of the entire industry during the first half of that year, was impacted by a number of factors related to the after effects of the pandemic, some of which both Rob and Pat have touched upon, but namely a shortage of semiconductor chips and other supply chain issues that impacted global vehicle production, an inability to fully flex our labor costs given an erratic production environment, with certain programs being stopped and restarted unexpectedly on short notice. This was compounded by labor shortages, which made it difficult to lay off people temporarily. A negative sales mix, with some of our higher volume programs being disproportionately impacted by OEM production shutdowns and customer call-offs. Most notably, the Chevy Equinox and GMC Terrain, as well as the Sierra and Silverado large pickup truck platforms, all very important to our product portfolio. Cost inflation has also been a factor, as Pat noted. This includes wages, materials, transportation, energy, which is mainly a European phenomenon, and other inputs. And as also Pat noted, higher than normal new business launch activity has also had an impact. During the last 18 months, we have launched the largest volume of new programs in the company's history. And as such, launch-related costs have been elevated. In addition to this, the erratic production environment and short-notice call-offs have resulted in launch curves. That is the time it takes to get from start of production to mature volumes, being extended from the normal 2 to 3 months to anywhere from 6 to 12 months in some cases, which has further compounded the issue. As you can see from this slide, total sales in 2021 were $3.8 billion, which was up about 12% from 2020, as lower industry production volumes in our North American market and on certain key platforms was more than offset by new revenues from new programs. Despite the higher sales, our adjusted operating income margins fell by almost 200 basis points to 1.8%, and adjusted EBITDA was down by about 13% year over year, given the various production and cost headwinds I just mentioned. Free cash flow was negative $122 million for the year as we continued to follow through on our new program CapEx commitments to our customers, while at the same time dealing with this erratic and challenging environment. This is obviously well below our historical or pre-COVID performance, and also well below where we expect to be next year, as our 23 outlook shows. I'll have more to say on that in a few moments. So overall, needless to say, 2021 was another challenging year for us in the industry, more challenging in many respects than 2020 when COVID first hit the scene. We have been through a lot as a company and an industry. I've learned a lot along the way, and as I noted earlier, I believe we are a stronger company for it. So to our people, again, I wanted to thank you all for your efforts and dedication to the company during these very challenging and unprecedented times. It is very much appreciated. We wouldn't be here where we are today without your drive and resiliency. So thank you. Now let's move on. Now for the good news. I'm happy to say that 2022 is off to a much better start. As you can see here, our 2022 first quarter results were much improved sequentially, from a slight operating loss in Q4 to a near 4% operating income margin in Q1, a substantial jump by all accounts. As we benefited from a more stable production environment with a lower level of chip-related production shutdowns and customer call-offs during the quarter. While still not perfect and somewhat still bumpy, the production environment was much better during Q1. In particular with our largest customer, General Motors, who was hit disproportionately by the semiconductor shortage during 2021, in particular during the back half of that year. While we continue to face headwinds from supply shortages, cost inflation, and higher than normal launch activity, our expectation for results to be better in the first half of this year, followed by further recovery in the back half of the year, appears to be on track thus far. As supply chain bottlenecks improve and our launch activity normalizes, we believe 2022 will be a transition year to a multi-year period of strong financial results, and our Q1 results are a positive data point that gives us confidence that this will be the case. Taking a closer look at our performance quarter over quarter, Q1 production sales are up 30% over Q4 on industry production volumes that were up only 6% in our core North American market. Our sales growth outpaced overall market growth materially, given new program launches and a positive mix, as programs that were most impacted by the production shutdowns of previous quarters also saw more pronounced recoveries as production began to normalize. As noted earlier, these include programs such as the Chevy Equinox and GM's large pickup platforms. Q1 adjusted operating income margin came in at 3.8%, a marked improvement from the losses generated in Q4 and Q3 for that matter, representing an incremental margin on production sales of about 19%. Somewhat lower than normal for us due to the continued inflationary cost pressures we are facing in energy and material, including freight costs. Tooling sales declined just during the quarter, off an unusually high level in Q4, and as such, total sales were up just under 10%. Adjusted EBITDA of $112 million was up almost 80% quarter-over-quarter, a notable recovery and achievement given the persistent industry challenges that we continue to work through. Free cash flow in Q1 was negative, reflecting the timing of working capital flows for both production and tooling-related working capital. As noted in the past, tooling-related working capital, in particular, can be lumpy and unpredictable between quarters. Seasonality was also a factor, as we tend to harvest working capital in Q4, while we tend to deploy it in Q1. So overall, as noted, a much better start to this year. Q1 was a good quarter for us, considering the environment, with more progress to come. Our Q1 results demonstrate that when the volumes are there and are more stable, the margin follows. Still not where we want to be, but a big step forward towards our ultimate financial goals and objectives. We're starting to see that light at the end of the tunnel, and that is definitely positive. We'll take it for now and build off the positive momentum. Moving on to our balance sheet, net debt did increase in Q1 of this year to about $922 million, and more so since the onset of the pandemic, when the world changed and one challenge after another was thrown our way. New program CapEx commitments to our customers and an increase in non-cash working capital, both production and tooling related, again, while at the same time dealing with a lower margin environment for the various reasons noted, have contributed to the increased debt levels. As we announced on our fourth quarter conference call earlier this year, as Pat highlighted, in November of 2021, in light of the semiconductor shortage and other challenges, we proactively amended our lending agreements with our banking syndicate to provide us with increased financial covenant flexibility. Similar to what we did in 2020, the company's calculation was net debt to EBITDA ratio for covenant purposes now excludes EBITDA from Q3 and Q4 of 2021. Those are the two quarters particularly hit hard by the industry-wide semiconductor shortage. And the covenant is now based on the annualized total of the remaining quarters in the relevant trailing 12-month period. In addition, the maximum net debt to EBITDA covenant has increased to 4 times for Q1 this year, 4.5 times for Q2, and 3.75 times for Q3, before returning back to 3 times in Q4 later this year. On this basis, our calculated net debt to EBITDA under the revised terms was 2.43 times in Q1, a comfortable level well below the covenant maximum of 4 times for the quarter. Overall, despite the increased levels, we are comfortable with our balance sheet position and expect to remain well within the covenants stipulated in our amended credit agreement. This ultimately is a byproduct of going into the pandemic with a strong balance sheet as a starting point. A strong balance sheet gives you the flexibility you need to manage your way through the tough times, like the last 2 years, for example. I think that would qualify. Our leverage ratio should naturally improve in the coming quarters as we get back to a positive free cash flow profile and generate an increasing amount of EBITDA like we did in Q1. Q1 was a good starting point in that regard, and we expect more to follow. We have strong relationships with our lenders, and we thank them for their continued support. Next, I would like to move on to the longer-term financial outlook of the business. We've outlined our thoughts on the future in the last few quarterly calls, but I'd like to summarize here for you. Despite the current erratic but improving environment, we are very optimistic in the long-term prospects for our business. As it relates to 2023 specifically, we continue to expect to achieve total sales, including tooling sales, of $4.6 to $4.8 billion, an adjusted operating income margin exceeding 8%, and more than $200 million in free cash flow. As we work towards these objectives, we are off to a good start this year, as our Q1 22 results demonstrate. And as noted, we expect further improvement as we progress through the year and as supply conditions and launch activity normalize. And as we get some relief on the cost side through a combination of input cost normalization and our cost recoveries through commercial negotiations, as Pat discussed. If you really think about it, based on our Q1 results, we are essentially halfway there on our operating margin target, and already at the low end of our 23 sales guidance range if you simply extrapolate Q1 22 sales over 4 quarters. So there's been positive movement towards these goals. On the margin front, Pat walked us through the bridge to our greater than 8% margin target earlier. Not going to go through the drivers there, but needless to say, we are making progress in each of those drivers, and our Q1 results reflect that. And at the end of the day, we won't stop at just achieving these 23 objectives. We see a bright future beyond 23 as well. As we've repeatedly said, demand for vehicles remains robust, and vehicle inventories continue to trend near an all-time low. This is expected to support strong industry production volumes for several years to come once supply-side pressures ease. That is good news and good for business. We've also won a substantial amount of new business in recent years that we continue to launch on. The combination should result in strong sales for the foreseeable future. I do want to take a closer look at our plus $200 million of free cash flow outlook, as I believe this is very important, if not the most important piece of our 2023 outlook. We are spending a lot of time as an executive team on positioning the business to be a sustainable free cash flow generator for years to come. On the surface, it may seem to some that $200 million in 2023 is an ambitious goal. On that, I would like to remind everyone that we are well on our way to establishing that type of profile before the pandemic hit, with about $115 million in free cash flow generated in 2019, on much lower sales, I might add. As already noted, based on our Q1 sales, we think our 23 sales outlook is very achievable, assuming the industry production volume picture holds. And Pat walked you through our path to our greater than 8% operating margin, which essentially gets us back to pre-COVID levels and expectations. Not a stretch, assuming a more normal environment. The remainder of the expected free cash flow will come from a normalization in our CapEx, and we have a line of sight on this. Our capital spending is expected to decline to a range approximating depreciation as a percentage of sales in 2023. The two main drivers continue to be second-generation programs on our flexible weld lines, which require less capital than their first iteration, and getting past our heavy investment cycle in aluminum. This is one of the key drivers underpinning our free cash flow outlook. Remember, CapEx has been elevated the last few years, including in 2019. So this is a key difference in comparing our 19 results and 23 outlook. So when you put it all together, we think $200 million in free cash flow is a very realistic goal. We are very focused as a team on bringing that home. And our track record on delivering on our financial targets speaks for itself. And we are confident that this will continue to be the case as we deliver on our 23 outlook, including the $200+ million in free cash flow. Lastly, I wanted to touch upon our capital allocation priorities. You can see our philosophy and approach on this slide. In the short term, we are highly committed and focused on delivering on our 23 outlook, and that includes putting internal constraints on CapEx spending so that we can fulfill our free cash flow objectives. As we deliver on our outlook and start generating free cash flow, we will move to pay down some debt. We think this is important. We are committed to a strong balance sheet over time, and as such, established a net debt to EBITDA target of about 1.5 times several years ago. We were there pre-pandemic. We remain committed to this target, and we expect to achieve it again within a reasonable time frame. Beyond that, we take a total return approach to capital allocation. Simply put, we invest where the potential returns are highest. This includes investing in our business, Note that we have always invested in and will continue to invest in technology products that support our business. Further, looking at where our stock is trading at today, it's hard to imagine many opportunities that can compete with investing in our own stock. So buybacks are likely to factor prominently in our strategy and use of free cash flow in the future. Dividend growth is always a possibility, but at this point, based on other opportunities, we see an approach geared more to maintaining the dividend at current levels. We will obviously reassess over time. We also continue to look at M&A opportunities in the normal course of our business. As it stands, these would have to be highly compelling. In the last several years, we've done 3. NanoXplore, with about $40 million of cash invested, with the investment now worth a lot more, about $150 million today. I would say that's not a bad investment. The investment can be viewed as reducing debt levels. We also did Metalsa right at the beginning of the pandemic, which we paid about $20 million or so, which was a really good deal for us, giving us a German base in our steel metal forming business, and allowing us to win a substantial amount of content on Mercedes EV2 core electric vehicle platform, as Pat outlined. This new work is currently going into our Tuscaloosa facility, which was part of the transaction. We also bought back some of our own stock, which we felt compelling at the time, and which will benefit those shareholders who invest in us for the long term by rewarding them with a higher stake in the company. We bought back about 8% of our outstanding float count over 2018, 2019, and in the early part of 2020, pre-pandemic. While we certainly remain willing to look at opportunities, we feel it is very important to be disciplined and prudent in our approach, as we always are. The bar is high, given the opportunity we have with our own stock. So that's all I wanted to cover from my end. Thank you for your time. Again, it's always a pleasure to talk about our company. There is no denying that we are navigating through some challenging times in our industry. The good news is these challenges are temporary. We've already made some great progress in working through them, and we'll make more progress as we move through the year. More importantly, we are confident in the longer-term prospects for the business in our industry. And as you can tell, we are very excited about what the future holds. So thank you, and with that, I'll turn you back over to Rob.
So, now you can see how we see the world in an hour and a half. Any Q&A, any questions, any comments? We've filled you with information and lunch awaits. With that, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I need the directors at the front for a short meeting for 5 minutes. I really appreciate everything that we've talked about here today. Feel free to talk to us or buttonhole us one-on-one, and we'll see you again next year. Thank you.